guys, this is Kitlandria Bookcast. Thank you for tuning in for our first episode of All the Games of Stage. I'm really happy that Floyd, the owner and webmaster of RPHQ, RP Headquarters, has reached out to me and allowed me this opportunity. So today I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background on me and why I'm so excited to be hosting this program. So it's kind of embarrassing on some level, and if you're embarrassed about being a nerd, I guess, but I actually started role-playing at the age of 9 in AOL chat rooms, and that was some pretty hardcore stuff back then, as I'm sure you can imagine, but from there I got into some forum role-playing. By 13 I was playing Dungeons & Dragons, and from there it was EverQuest, and into pretty much every MMO I can remember at this point. I've played Lord of the Rings, World of Warcraft, Elder Scrolls, and now I'm getting into the Chronicles of Valyria community. So for those of you, I know a lot of you tuning in are specifically going to be from Chronicles of Valyria, and I will speak as to that as I'm able to. It is going to be a fantastic new opportunity for role-playing, and I am definitely encouraging you to check it out if you have not yet. The cool thing about this game is that it's going to be very immersive, whether you're a role player or not, because the entire game will be based off of narrative that's created not only by each person, but by the game system for each person. So it definitely has some cool opportunities there. So today's topic is how not to roleplay a Mary Sue. And of course, our biggest question is, what exactly is a Mary Sue? This term gets thrown around a lot, specifically in the fan fiction community. But when we think about online role-playing, a lot of it is kind of melding our ideas of ourselves or an idea for a character in with a setting and lore that's already pre-established. With that, it's practically fan fiction. So I would say Mary Sues are just as relevant in online role-playing as they are for trying to actually write a fan fiction. So let's define that term to start with. A Mary Sue is a lot of different things, but predominantly it is basically somebody who's overly perfect. Like I said, they're normally found in fan fiction, but they are invincible, they're multi-talented, they're to the extreme. They're loved by everybody. And it just leads to the character often being kind of unbearable. They can be seen as a know-it-all. They can be seen as almost too perfect to be relatable. And what ends up happening is that the person playing the character might love them, but the people around them often don't. And so there are some tips and tricks to try and avoid that. And the number one is simply to understand that characters are supposed to be like real people. They are not supposed to be, superheroes. They're not supposed to be perfection. They're not gods. Those are backdrop characters. Those are characters that are already going to be worked into the game systems. They are characters that are going to be related to the lore. We don't need to play those characters. What we want is to really create kind of the filler and make things really come to life and be authentic and be real. So I am definitely wanting to take some questions, but I'm going to start with some general tips. So these are specifically for MMOs. That is my number one passion for role-playing, even though I have done tabletop for years. I love all of the White Wolf, Rifts, Mutants and Masterminds, Star Wars, and so on and so forth. But my passion is definitely for MMOs. I have run several role-playing guilds, specifically in World of Warcraft, Lord of the Rings Online, and most recently Elder Scrolls Online. And in Chronicles of Valyria, I will be running a role-playing centered town. So when we're looking at these games, we want to know the stories and the backdrop of the game as well as we can. We really want to know the lore as much as it's going to relate to our character. What we don't want to do is mold the lore or kind of force the lore away from its authenticity. I totally support coming up with cool plots, and part of the focus for my role-playing groups is for everybody to have the spotlight. But you want to create that spotlight within the lore that already exists and make sure that it's kind of setting appropriate. You don't want, to go on Elder Scrolls, which is very much a fantasy game with magic and sort of medieval themes, and try and play a futuristic character who, is traveling back from the future or something like that. It's just not lore appropriate. So you want to keep those things in mind. Know your material. You want your character to be plausible in the universe that you're role-playing them in. And you also want to avoid making them related to a character who is part of the canon story. So, for example, if you were going to talk about Elder Scrolls Online, having a character related to Queen Irene would be a little too Mary Sue. Or having yourself be related to a boss in World of Warcraft. Think of your character more as an ensemble cast than a main character. While you are the main character of your individual story, in the scheme of the online game, you are not. And this is a problem that people run into when they get into role-playing communities, is they really want that spotlight, and it can go really, really poorly, and really lead to being ostracized and kind of booted out of the group, because you are not the center of the universe. You are a character in a full world, just like the real world. So it's very Mary Sue if you always put the attention on yourself. And you want the characters, the other people role-playing with you, to get the spotlight. You want to trade off. You want everybody to be able to be involved. And that's something that can be really difficult to do. And I've seen some really great groups pull together and make sure that everybody gets a chance. Picking a realistic name is also a hard one. Having a Trixie Bella Arwen in a game where that doesn't really fit, probably not the best idea, and going to come across as very Mary Sue. If you're playing in Lord of the Rings Online, having an elven name for an elven character, great. Having that same character in Elder Scrolls might not come across the right way. So keep in mind kind of what the canon naming is for the universe that you're playing in and try and go with that. My number one tip not to roleplay a Mary Sue is to make sure that your character has flaws. Flaws make a character human. All of us have flaws. All of us can sit back and think of places we've messed up in life, ways that we could improve. We want those same things for our characters, so definitely think about what their flaws are. I like to think of at least one irrational fear for every character I play, just so that there is a sense of them really being authentic. There's something that really gets to them and bothers them. So consider how that might play a role. I see a comment, even their flaws turn out to be advantages. Yeah, that can definitely be something that Mary Sues do, if they have this flaw, but it turns out to be secretly a thing that gets them by at the end of the day, or yields to this superpower, or gets them out of a really tough situation. That's not realistic character growth. So we want to think about how those flaws play into the overarching storyline of their lives and how that really can hold them back, because we want them to be held back in some way. Making things hard for a new character. Your character does not start off a weapon master. They don't start off the best at everything. They don't start off the best at anything, probably. So think about where they're coming from and how they're going to realistically grow. Above all, you can borrow from you, but don't make it you. Don't make it your life story and a character. That could be seen as kind of one version of a Mary Sue, is just like, so you want to avoid kind of your personal opinions and beliefs being all your character is. I like to take one little piece of me and incorporate it into a character, maybe one flaw I'm working through in life right now, or a challenge, and kind of shape a character around that. But each character is only a sliver. It's not just me. So consider how you can develop character within that universe and have them have those authentic experiences that help them grow through those situations. So that is my overview to start with, and I want to stop just rambling here to get you guys an opportunity to maybe ask some questions. So I do have a couple right here, so I'll go ahead and take those. So Sir Robster, who is from the Chronicles of Illyria community, sent these to me through Discord. How do you find the balance point between a boring story and an unrealistic story when creating your character's backstory? Good question. So I definitely consider kind of what is exciting versus what's boring. You know, that's going to be different for everyone. I like to have at least one kind of traumatic event that has defined that character. You know, for Chronicles of Illyria, looking back, you know, we're still waiting on some lore for how the burning happened. And I don't want to come across as Mary Sue there, so I'm kind of waiting for some more details to find, would people have been involved that far back? You know, would they have been fully fleshed people that were ripped out of these situations, you know, of being in old Illyria and then finding themselves in new Illyria? Don't know yet. But I imagine, looking back into that backstory, if they did exist at that time, it could be really traumatic to see the world ripped apart, and that would be lore appropriate. Elder Scrolls Online, you know, something traumatic could have been, you know, a Daedric prince came into the town and possessed some people and did some crazy things, and they saw their family go through something. I like to take real world trauma into consideration, but not have it be where the character is literally like everything that's happened to them has been a trauma, because then that starts to get really unrealistic. You know, the whole series of unfortunate events can be really awesome, but you want to keep it kind of, what are the defining events? Maybe think of the 3 big events or the 3 defining things that they've gone through. Good character names. That's another question from Sir Robster. So I just mentioned how Mary Sue's often kind of borrow from sort of these trope names. We don't have, for Chronicles of Illyria, we don't really have naming conventions yet. You know, Lord of the Rings has naming conventions. Elder Scrolls has naming conventions. World of Warcraft even has some basic naming conventions. If you can research into that, it can really give your character some depth, and can really flesh you out within that universe. And then Sir Robster asked, do you prefer text-based RP, voice-based RP, or full interaction RP? My preference is text-based. For those of you who know me, I am absolutely insane about writing. I'm an aspiring novelist. I'm currently writing the, Kale from COE just said the fantasy named generators. That is a great tool for those coming up with names. If you're really stuck, I have used them a time or two. But back to the how I prefer my role playing, I like the chance to be able to write. But in terms of the Mary Sue-ness, here's what I would warn against if you're doing text-based role playing. I have seen, and I have gone through this myself, so it is a situation where I'm speaking to my experience and things that I've seen, is people have a tendency to get really flowery when they're Mary Sueing. They will describe every little detail about themselves in perfect poetic detail, but then when they're talking about their environment or they're talking about other people, it's like really boring, straightforward text. And that can be an indicator that you're kind of leaning towards Mary Sue if, again, you're kind of putting too much spotlight while ignoring, you know, this universe that exists around you. So that's a good litmus test. You know, how are you describing you versus everyone else? Or you and your significant other in a role-playing situation. In voice-based RP, I do love voice-based RP. 7 Days to Die is a great platform for that because, you know, you're kind of trying to flee for your life from zombies, so typing isn't really the best, and proximity is really cool there. But I don't find a lot of people that do voice-based RP, so if anyone wants to 7 Days to Die with me, I would love it. And then full interaction I would consider tabletop, and that would be my second favorite. Banjax asked, can you give examples of good flaws and bad flaws? Ooh, that's a good one. So good flaws and bad flaws, for me, I don't know that there are straight out of the gate good ones versus bad ones that immediately pop to my mind so much as how they're applied. So, you know, I'm thinking of a character that that I have who has a fear of water. She is from a science fiction universe and lives on a planet where they don't really have to interact with large bodies of water. That's not really a flaw that comes up a lot, but as she starts to travel to different locations, it does come up. It's not crippling to her, but it can totally add to flavor text, and it could absolutely make a situation where she can't function. So a bad flaw, I would say, is something that's going to cripple the role-playing around you or be obnoxious for everybody else that's trying to interact with you. You know, if you're a character that, let's just say you're role-playing a character and you're inspired by a mental illness. I do think that it can be interesting to have characters with mental illnesses if they are role-played tastefully and with a genuine mind for, you know, depression, anxiety, etc., whatever they're kind of going through, because people in real life have these illnesses, and exploring that in role-playing can be a really great opportunity. Taking that and setting it to the max in a way that's insulting or derogatory or is getting in the way of everybody else enjoying kind of what's going on would be a bad flaw to apply. So it's kind of how it's applied. Banjax, does that kind of answer that question, or do you want me to go into a little bit more detail? Taking a second to read some of these comments. I love Put on My Robe and Wizard Hat, by the way. I showed that to somebody back when I was in college in the library, and they actually fell out of their chair and we were kicked out. It was something else. It's a special role play right there. And I am glad that somebody else is interested in 7 Days to Die role playing, because I think it is an awesome opportunity. And my lovely Chronicles of Valyria kingdom is absolutely being awful right now. Great, guys. I love you. So while I'm waiting for more questions, I did have this great survey. So this is kind of some questions to ask yourself to see if you're role-playing a Mary Sue. Question 1. Is your character's name a variation of your name, a name you planned on giving your children, taken deliberately from a character from a fan fiction or a fandom you like? Do they have an unusual or exotic name that doesn't fit the setting? Reminders that, of course, you know, in Elder Scrolls, Lord of the Rings, etc., they're going to have kind of crazy names. Not even, like, fitting kind of their background. You know, if they grow up in, so let's say they grow up in the town I'm running in Chronicles of Valyria, it's very much going to be a shamanic town, you know, biomes willing. If we get, you know, a nature, you know, very foresty based one, having names like Rain Dancer or, you know, something like that could be appropriate if the character's parents kind of come from a lineage that named things like that. Tundra people, probably not. So think about those naming conventions. Next question is, do you deliberately base your character's appearance on how you look or how you wish you looked? So we want characters that are purposeful in their appearances. I know it's very natural to want to have very beautiful characters, but if our characters are beautiful or handsome without purpose, or, you know, just for that purpose to be handsome or beautiful, I kind of frown on that. So, for example, I have had a character in Elder Scrolls that was deliberately beautiful because she was kept that way. She was kept pristine because she was basically targeted by an organization, a Dinmiri organization that took people that looked like her. And it became a flaw because she didn't like being that perfection once she'd escaped from this situation. So kind of thinking about how that appearance can actually play against the character gets it away from Mary Sue territory. Do you, and I already mentioned this, but like, are you describing your character as beautiful, handsome, cute without having to have any effort? Like, I've literally seen people describe, like, she was so beautiful without doing a thing. She was just stunning on her own. Stay away from that. If you emote that other people are jealous of your good looks, get right away from that. If you have people getting in fights because your character is handsome or beautiful, again, kind of an issue. And taking too much time to describe the character's physique can get really into Mary Sue. The way that I try to approach that, because it is important to kind of give that glance of what the character looks like when somebody's meeting them for the first time, but you want to avoid that being the focus of the role playing or being all that's talked about. You know, I've seen people emote like they introduce the character and then the next emote is about their muscles, and then the next emote's about their smile, and then the next emote's about some other feature, and they just kind of keep rambling with that. Get more into what your character's doing than what they look like. In MMOs, this is great, and this is actually one of the reasons I really like MMOs, is because your character is there. And describing just the little details that look different than the MMO allows them to look is a great opportunity to focus more on the character's actions than kind of that physical appearance. Yeah, so the dissociative personality disorder, good would be to portray it tastefully and have it be detrimental, and not to have each personality be an expert on things with no detriment. I have played characters with dissociative identity disorder, and it's really, and another comment, mental illness RP is really challenging and easy to get wrong. So I am a therapist, and I have sitting right next to me the DSM-5. Anyone want to talk about mental illnesses, please feel free to hit me up and we can talk about what they actually look like, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people, like I said when we were talking about flaws, really can get distasteful, insulting, misunderstood, and people within the community that might experience those disorders could really be upset by that, and we want to be respectful. That doesn't mean stay away from those things. If you're really interested, yes, Kat, I have the Bible, the DSM-5. So dissociative identity disorder can be so interesting, but can be so done wrong if you don't actually understand the disorder. You know, most people think of it as multiple personality disorder, which is a very, very rare diagnosis now. What it often is more of a dissociative disorder where the character kind of checks out. I actually have an Elder Scrolls character that experiences that checking out. And I only try and do that when it is in small group role playing, so it's not stealing the show. You know, you have a character zonk out all of a sudden or rapidly switch personalities when you're in a large group, that is begging for the spotlight to be put on you. You're literally saying, okay, look away from the scene that's being unfolded with everybody, look at me. And that really nosedives into Mary Sue territory. I agree on the character creator comment, Banjax, because you know, we are limited oftentimes, and I don't know what the COE character creator is going to look like, and I am crossing all of my fingers and toes that it's going to be beautiful. But Elder Scrolls Online, Lord of the Rings Online, World of Warcraft, a lot of those characters were not the way I wanted them to look. So I do definitely acknowledge that sometimes you have to kind of tweak your descriptions a little bit and, you know, add some fluff to that. The big thing is the making sure that that's not the focus of your role playing or you're getting into that Mary Sue territory. Elb, I totally agree with your comment about mental disorders in movies and TV shows being portrayed wrong. And that's why I encourage you, if you are going to play a character that suffers from something, to make sure that you are that you are doing it tastefully and actually realistically. You know, do your research. That's a big thing with not having a Mary Sue character. Do your research. So more little tips about physical appearance is to not just have your character shown or described as petite or really, really tall all the time and without, you know, a little bit more content there. I love using celebrities. People that are in my COE Discord role-playing chat room know that I use just random pictures from movie stars, from the internet, you know, kind of whatever, to give us a base idea of what the character would look like before a game, and then once I have that game character, you know, I swap to that. But we want to avoid in the actual role-playing describing them like that character. If you are doing like a flaw, like a physical flaw, don't have the only flaw be something that's so minuscule it's not noticeable, unless it's more of a thing that you only want exposed through, you know, through one-on-one role-playing, where you might get to expose a little bit more of your backstory. Don't make your character impervious to the normal limitations or weaknesses of their species, or Chronicles of Valyria, their tribe. So we don't have much tribe information yet, but we do know pretty well that the different tribes are going to have different limitations. Let's say Kipik. We know the Kipik are really tiny, and we know the Yoru are really big, and we are pretty easily able to assume that the Yoru are going to be really great in the snow, and Kipik are going to be really great in broadleaf forests. It's very Mary Sue to have them, you know, to have that Kipik that's like suddenly great in the tundra, unless game mechanics dictate that your character really is great in the tundra. I encourage people above all to use the mechanics of the games that they are in as much as they can, because that's a great platform to create that character. Banjax said, I normally make my characters underpowered on purpose, that way it's more impressive when they succeed. You know, that's not a bad idea. I actually completely think that that can be a good idea. If there's something you really want your character to eventually be super good at, make it to where there is something against them that's a force pushing back, that's, you know, pushing against them to keep them from reaching that goal. And Chronicles of Valyria, I know I keep going back to that, it's just kind of the examples that are on my mind. My character is likely to start out with absolutely zero build for any kind of combat, and she wants to be a combat nurse, essentially, a combat healer. So that's going to be something she's really going to have to work on, and that I'm going to have the game mechanics support me in doing. Banjax, I love it. Banjack says he or she is so humble that they are the most humble of our peers and deserves a medal. I love it. So, back to my list. The crossbreeding, I've seen some of that happen, Elder Scrolls, World of Warcraft, tabletop role-playing games, probably going to be relevant pretty quickly out of the gate in Chronicles of Valyria. If your character is a crossbreed or hybrid, and you want to avoid being a Mary Sue, avoid, one, completely unheard of hybrids, two, where they end up with no weaknesses but all of the strengths of both, both things that are being merged together. Are you doing it because it makes your character more interesting and exotic, or is it genuinely a part of the story? So consider that story. A lot of times the biggest Mary Sue thing is magic powers. In Chronicles of Valyria, it's going to be the gifted characters, the talented characters. Everybody wants to roleplay one of those. I think the statistic, and somebody in chat who knows these statistics can throw this out at me, I think it's supposed to be about 5% of characters will end up gifted. And yet, if you stroll through chat rooms, everybody has magic power. So much so that it's been banned in a lot of role-playing rooms. In Elder Scrolls Online, the thing I see all the time is everybody is connected to the Daedra, and they have Daedric artifacts, and they're just homies with the Daedra, and so they've got, these extraordinary abilities or things at their beck and call. World of Warcraft, it was probably very similar. I remember people playing like the unstoppable mage character, the warlock that's immortal, the only realistic way that you could have that immortal character in World of Warcraft is maybe a Death Knight. So kind of considering, again, how it fits in with your universe. In Elder Scrolls Online, being a vampire or being, being a werewolf is going to make you actually able to have that as a part of your backstory. Banjax, I know in Chronicles of Valyria, that's kind of going to be randomly assigned, and characters might discover that they are gifted through kind of their personal story quests that come up in the game engine. But more details on that are probably going to be released in the future. In other games, Elder Scrolls, it's pretty reasonable to say that if you're a sorcerer, that's your class, then you probably have some magical ability. But again, it's kind of not overdoing it. So I am going to start wrapping up here shortly. So if anyone has any last minute questions, if you could post them in the Twitch chat or DM them to me on Discord if you have that handy, I would appreciate that. I would like to wrap things up. And if anybody has an idea for what they would like the next Q&A to be about, I'm not quite sure. Kat, I'm sorry I can't answer that question. If I had that question or that answer, I would split it with you. Maybe. I'm a nice person, but I don't have the winning lottery numbers. But anyway, we do have a list of topics that we are looking to get involved with. And I'm not sure exactly how often RPHQ is wanting to do these, but if there is a demand, I will definitely be happy to do them. Banjax, I will pop my Discord name right here, right now, into the Twitch channel. That is a great question from John Colder. I'm probably butchering that, and I'm sorry. Is Ray a Mary Sue? That has yet to be determined for me. I would say that there is a chance she could be, but I get the sense that she's not because we kind of got to see her freaking out. We got to see her freaking out about her past when she got that lightsaber. You know, we got to see the harsh environment that she was growing up with. She's very upset about the loss of her family. So she definitely has some character flaws, even though she's coming into a lot of power kind of suddenly. So I wouldn't say she's Mary Sue. Final question, unless I get any super quickly here. Rain Dancer asked examples of physical flaws to avoid being a Mary Sue. Scars are pretty common. If it's an interesting scar with a good story, I say go for it. But a lot of times it's like the over the eye, you know, the Anakin Skywalker scar. Stay away from things that you see all the time. If you're going to go with a scar, you know, go with something, I think I said this, like where it's actually noticeable, that actually sort of disfigures the character. But if you're going for someone physically and fairly attractive, it could be something that's more hidden on their body. It could be, you know, some kind of mobility issue maybe that you role play out. You know, maybe one of their legs has a slight limp, or they really fumble with their left or their right hand. But again, you don't want to get into the realm of it being debilitating for role-playing purposes, because again, it kind of puts all the spotlight on you. Above all, in terms of not role-playing those Mary Sues, just ask yourself the question, what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of my character having these things, and how am I going to apply that? Is this going to be something that is intended to get all of the attention in the world? Or is it something that's going to create a cool backdrop for other people to tell stories around? For me, role-playing is communal. It is not a spotlight. It is not me telling you a story and you being the only one that listens. Role-playing is collaboration. I like to describe it as collaborative writing. So think about that, and think about whether or not you are trying to be the main character. Are you trying to make yourself awesome so that everyone will pay attention to you? If you are, you're probably in Mary Sue territory. So try and get yourself a little bit away from that. So I've posted my Discord name in the Twitch chat. You can find me on the Chronicles of Valyria forums. You can find me as Mayoress Ariadne, or just Ariadne, on the RPHQ, also as Kitlandria, I believe, on RPHQ. I'm really easy and accessible to get in touch with. So if anyone has any questions that they would like answered in a future episode, please feel free to reach out. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, and I will be available on Discord for a little while longer tonight. All right, thanks, guys.